Thank you. All right, next up we have a panel discussion on scaling up hardware operations. To moderate the session, we have another Sateesh, the Managing Director of India Partners. Please put your hands together for Mr. Sateesh Andra. All right, and moving on to the panelists to quickly introduce them, Mr. Zainul Charbiwala, he's the co-founder and CTO at Tricog Health. All right, and our next panelist is the co-founder and CEO of Emotix, Mr. Sneh Vaswani. All right, so Sateesh, the panel and the audience is all yours.
Yeah, good afternoon. So I think Sateesh covered a bunch of topics that we're going to discuss, but here you'll hear from practitioners. I just want to understand how many of you are entrepreneurs here in this room, building startups? Okay, maybe like 10, 15%. And how many of you are from the hardware background? Okay. I think the rest of them want to probably understand hardware. So I think if you really look at today, Industry 4.0, almost hardware has become inevitable in everything that we do, all the way from healthcare to even fintech, because when you talk about payments, when you talk about medical devices, when you talk about robotics, when you talk about autonomous vehicles, smart cities, it doesn't matter. I think hardware has become way of life. So even if one is building software, I think it's very important to understand because they have to coexist. My background, I run a venture capital fund. I've made lots of hardware investments, including semiconductor investments. I think we have two great entrepreneurs here, Zainul and Sneh, building these startups. So the focus of today's session is really, how do you go through kind of this life cycle? Once you have envisioned and you do prototyping and you understand that there is customer demand, how do you scale up that operations? There may be multiple phases of scaling up operations, but how do you make those decisions in terms of whether it's testing, design for assembly or design for manufacturing? Second thing is, how do you choose a ODM, OEM strategy? Third is COGS analysis. I think it's very, very important. And then eventually setting up operations and maintenance, because you could have a great product, but if you really don't support your customers really well, it's difficult to sustain and scale your business. And obviously, some of the other aspects, which are kind of, the excise and the custom duties, we're not going to talk too much about it. If we had somebody from MeitY or DiTi on the panel, we would have talked about it, but so we're not going to spend too much time. So the way we are going to run this is we'll leave enough time for Q&A. You're very welcome to ask questions. We'll have, so Zainul runs Tricog, is one of the founders. He drives all of technology and involved with business strategy. Tricog is, I call it a telecardiology kind of company, right? Insta ECG, they analyze ECGs from a command center and help save, hundreds and thousands of lives. Sneh is founder and runs a company called Emotix, which builds a personal intelligent companion robots, right? So they have a couple of slides. They'll talk about, their approaches, and then we'll have a few questions, and then open it up for Q&A. Go ahead, Zainul.
Hey, good afternoon. So Tricog, as Sateesh mentioned, is a telecardiology company. We're about 4 years old, and we do three things. The first thing we do is that we interface with commercial off-the-shelf ECG machines, and this one's made by GE. There's a little box that's attached to the GE machine which says Tricog on it. That's the box, that's the piece of hardware that we develop. And what that box does is when a patient comes in, a doctor hooks them up to the ECG machine. The box will extract the ECG from that machine in digital form and push it to the cloud. That's the first part. The second part is that we have a bunch of algorithms that process this ECG, and they create a preliminary diagnosis and annotations. And then a third is that we run a command center of doctors and cardiologists who actually look at the raw data and the analyzed data from the cloud, and they create a final report and send it back out to the remote center. So this is done, we do this a few thousand times a day now. It's done very, very quickly, so our turnaround time is about a few minutes. It's about a couple of minutes. So it's a very quick sort of service. As Sateesh mentioned, this is one of those examples where this is a real SaaS model. It's also sort of a system of systems, because we've got one system which is the extraction, which is what we call the TriCog communicator, but it's actually an accessory to a medical device and equipment. And so there's a few implications of what we've done which are very interesting, and I'd like to focus on some of that in the next slide or so. So just to go through our journey a little bit. And this is a little bit, one was stability, robustness, reliability, and the other was we wanted to use more ECG machines as time went on. So the 2016 version, which is the one shown in the center, only works with one model, whereas the one that we built last year works with about 20 different models. So it's a more independent product, right? What I'd like to do, I don't know whether we'll go through all of this in one go.
We don't need to. I think we'll discuss this during the panel discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll just hand it over to Sneh then, and then maybe we'll come back to this.
Yeah, but I think I want audience to focus on various aspects, whether it's the certification or whether it's in terms of component sourcing and the final assembly. I think these are all the decisions that one needs to make, as they kind of go through this life cycle and before they scale their operations.
Okay. Hello. Yeah. So my name is, thanks Zainul. My name is Sneh Vaswani. I represent a company called Emotics. We are in the business of building emotionally intelligent consumer products that solve grave consumer problems of the society. And unlike a B2B play here, we're pure B2C consumer-facing hardware company. And our first product is called Miko. It's a cute companion robot that engages, educates, and entertains children. What it does, if you search for Miko online, what it does is that it has conversations with kids, it understands their areas of interest, it personalizes itself based on the child, and also opens up the child's world by getting it access to education, entertainment, and different modalities. How did we started this journey in 2014 towards October when we started working on it, and we are touching 4 years now. Just to give you a very quick overview of our journey. So in October 2014, we came across some documented problems. What we learned is that the learning levels of kids are dropping year after year. There's a 50% drop in standard 3 kids who can do basic subtraction in India from 2009 to 14. Across millions of kids, the survey was conducted. This drop is seen not only in India, across the globe. Children have become tech savvy. They have access to information at their fingertips, but the ability to apply a concept was dropping. So when we spoke to some pedagogical experts, they told us that what if we have emotionally intelligent, they told us that 99% of learners, their favorite subject and teacher is the same. If your favorite teacher starts teaching you something which you don't like, you start developing affinity towards that subject. So we took this psychological data point and put a long short vision that let us build a future where we have emotionally intelligent interfaces of technology teaching a child, where it could be that a computer is teaching but also capturing the emotions of the child, and then based on whether the child is distracted or paying attention can then change its course. But to get to that point, we realized we are at least 7 to 8 years away, and we don't want to be an R&D company. So we realized that we have to be coming out with a product every year and gradually open up the market so that 7 to 8 years down the line, my technology is ready, my market is ready, and everything comes together. So our first product, which is Miko, has a very relevant problem of today that it solves. Parents see their kids hooked onto mediums of technology not fit for them. You would see your kids hooked onto YouTube, Facebook, WhatsApp at a very young age. I didn't have email till I was 16. So, but today children at 5 years can go and swipe their parents' credit card online and make a purchase. They're that smart these days. So, and parents dislike that fact. 92% of them said, no, we don't like it. And
so Sneh, we'll jump into the
correct
product side of the story.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Based on the insights that we got, we built Miko over 2.5 years of 22 product pilots, and across 50,000 plus kids and 4,000 plus parents were taken into consideration while building Miko. And going through that evolution and arriving at the product, today the product sells across 150 plus stores, and it's India's first companion robot, a new category. Across the globe, there are only 3 companies who actually shipped a product in this category, and we are one of them. So Miko right now, in the past 1 year, has seen a 30% growth in sales, and we've seen the journey of the consumer hardware company, and we see towards growing to a longer period of selling millions of units.
Great. Thank you. So you've heard, I mean, the reason to choose these 2 startups, I think one of them is focusing on B2B, the other is on the B2C. Both are roughly 4 years old, where StrikeHawk will have several thousands of systems. Obviously, a primary healthcare center can deploy and then connect to the command center. You look at Miko, probably millions of them out in the homes in future. So we all know, I think even Sateesh in his earlier conversation talked about GoPro. So we all know that companies like Nest and GoPro have been big success stories. But why do hardware companies fail? I think hardware companies, if you were to really distill the key success factors and why companies fail, is one, the product was not designed to manufacture at all, right? So they made wrong choices and you couldn't manufacture. The problem may be real and your idea may be good, but you were not able to manufacture. Or 2, the manufacturing costs were very high, too high. And the 3rd, you selected a wrong manufacturer. And the last thing is you didn't support the product properly. So I think these are, kind of the topics that we're going to discuss. But I want to quickly touch base on, the fast prototyping options. I think it's important, when you conceptualize something, how quickly can you prototype before you, and today, you've got 3D printing, you've got Raspberry Pis, you've got various. I'd like to know, Sneh and Zainul, have you guys looked at any of those? And especially Sneh, I mean, did you consider any of such platforms?
Yes, actually, there are 2 aspects of prototyping. One is the design, and second is the process that you use to prototype. So a conventional way of design is either you yourself are a designer and you should design. That's the fastest and the cheapest. And because in the early days, we did it everything ourselves, and we still do fiddle around with everything ourselves. But there are certain lot of cost-effective ways to propagate it to a fast pace. The conventional MNC way is to go to a design house and give them your requirements, and they will come back with a design. And then they will get into prototyping once you approve that design. This is a big money-making process where you burn your pockets deep. A better way is go to a design school, have a competition, get design students to build your design of your product, and you can gift an iPhone to the winner, and you'll get phenomenal designs. I know some of very big companies who got rebranded doing that as a very fast, efficient way of doing things. So you need to think of non-linear ways of saving capital, saving time, and keep moving forward. That's what the design stage input that I would say. 3D printing still works the fastest way to prototype something and keep checking. May not be the most cost-effective way, but there are cost-effective ways of doing it, which we'll discuss more. Zainul?
Sure. So I think, prototyping, really there's a, if you're thinking about building a hardware company, which is core hardware, I think the founders have to be core hardware to begin with. I think that's very important. The skill sets have to be there. The first board that I built for TriCog was probably my 30th or 40th board that I've built in my life. So, I've had that experience building those many boards, learning, what we got wrong, learning whether you got the passives wrong or the actives wrong, or, how to build a particular part of the digital or the analog side. There are elements of that only come through time. So that's, I think, one aspect of skill set that is very important. The other aspect, as Sneh talked about, is partners or ecosystem. Hardware there's a lot of different aspects that you need to consider. You can't download node modules and say npm install and you're done, right? You have to look at You have to look at partners that you need for 3D printing, for design, for components outsourcing, for doing your soldering. Can you do hand soldering yourself? Have you ever done a QFN, a QFP? Forget BGAs by hand. There are some people who do BGAs by hand in our office, right? So there's lots of those, small little subtle things that you still need to worry about when you're doing prototyping. And, for example, you'll choose a part during prototyping that may be easier to hand solder than not, right? But then you have to look at your product. Is that product, the form factor is very important, then maybe you have to go BGA. So there are all of these, examples for prototyping that you have to consider. And much of that really comes through talking to the right people and, of course, having done it yourself.
Yeah, and definitely if some of you are going the semiconductor route, of course, there are emulators and there are FPGA solutions before you really tape out, and taping out is very expensive. You're talking about $1 million to $1.5 million of test chips. So certainly you want to look at various options available to you. Now, when we move to testing, right? So, and especially testing at scale, whether it is EMC or thermal shock or drop tests. What kind of testing did you guys go through, and what can you share from your journey?
I think testing forms a very important aspect. We do testing at a factory level. Also at a warehouse level, we do a double testing because we're building a new category which has no prior test cases that need to be ensured. And testing varies from industry to industry completely. For us, it was child products. In child products, there are drop tests, children take it, toss it around. There are fatelet tests that you need to do to ensure that the chemical composition of elements are proper for a child. All these tests that are there from a sanity level of a certification stage. Every country has their own certification. So the countries that you're targeting, you need to ensure that those certifications that you've done. But once that is complete, an additional step of QA that we ensure is that the way people handle the product at home, we do that basic QA in-house even once the units reach us, and then we ship. So we are sure that the returns because of damaged out of manufacturing defects should be less than 1% no matter what. I mean, that's like the Apple benchmark of being less than 1%. Microsoft is at 2 to 3%. And so that is what we've targeted, and we've hit at that very correctly in terms of manufacturing defect-based returns that come in. Bed of nails tests, these are standard tests that are done at an electronics QC level, which if you have a good manufacturing partner, you'll be sorted onto that. So,
right.
Zainul?
Yeah. So for us, we are actually, although we are a medical company and it's it's related to medical hardware, we are actually not categorized. Our piece of hardware is actually not categorized as medical equipment,
device, yeah.
as a medical device. So actually, we are a little bit better off. Otherwise, if you're a medical device, you have far more stringent tests. So for us, we are categorized as a communications device. So it's almost the same sort of testing that we have to do for a router sort of product. So which is far simpler, and there's actually it's very well documented. Because these products are almost so commoditized. Of course, country level testing is very important. There are lots of labs that do all of this testing for us, whether it's ESD or EMI, EMC, whether it's all of your ROHS, your drop tests, your environment testing, all of those things. There's certifications. There are a bunch of labs that do them in India. We are mostly working with labs in India, but we've been told that you need to look out a little bit even for labs.
Yeah. No, again, it depends on certifications. Like you talked about, Sneh, I mean, for you, UL may be very relevant. For someone else, it's CE marking or FDA. So it depends on the type of certification that one needs to achieve. And then, the stress testing and the environmental testing and the EMC, all of the tests. I think the good thing is that there are enough service providers out there. So one needs to really look at what they want and then make choices and work with them and kind of go through the process. So I think Sateesh in his earlier thing, briefly pointed out that, even on hardware you want to make money and you want to have repeat sales or, kind of certain revenue stream coming from customer on a long-term basis. So the COGS aspects. So how did you come to a particular, price for your product, and what kinds of COGS analysis and what kinds of design trade-offs that you had to kind of go through. I think that becomes very, very important, fundamentally from deriving, to derive success. Yeah.
So I think we did some great mistakes on this, big ones, and we've learned from it and we've improved. In our first product, what we built was we kept the manufacturing cost fixed. इसके आगे नहीं बढ़ सकते. Everything rotates around that, because for me what works out is sales and business, because it is no point building a product that won't sell. So using all the inputs that he gave in the previous, that you need to ensure the retailer has margin, this margin, that ensure everything in picture, fix a price and then start building. The problems that happen when so this works out when you are in a category which is known and you have a competitor who's determining the price. Today if you're trying to build a phone, the category is so well known that you know what you need to target, where then it becomes a pure price play over there. But for a category like ours, which is so fresh, you should let the consumer feature derive it's a mixed process. Every day, the product manager looks at what features are going in in the initial design stages, an overview ballpark of what pricing of those components go in, and an overview ballpark of what the MRP would be. There is no point of putting a defense grade sensor which will give you a great feature and bring your price point to 1 lakh MRP when you know that won't sell. Right. So that trade-off needs to be maintained every day. No one can say the price on day one for a new category product. No manufacturer can tell you even at the design stage till the design is complete. So the question that you had at that time also was that keep a ballpark estimate of your price point. Keep a ballpark estimate of the features you want. Every day you progress on the features, have a look at it and maintain that trade-off so that that sheet is open in front of me as the business guy, my product team, my tech team, so that this is something that they're always seeing. मैंने ये feature add किया, इसका ये cost implication है. Only keep one person who takes a call onto that. Yes, no, and then you keep moving forward. Whether that feature is that important that you're okay to keep your product at a premium, that call needs to be taken every day, and that document is a sacred document that's open. So.
For us, COGS analysis earlier on was a little bit less of importance, because we are a service model, so we are a sort of a SaaS model for cardiology, and the hardware itself is only one piece of the entire sort of the product delivery that needs to be done. And really the price that Sneh talked about, so we are also a new category, but the price is actually being set by the diagnostics industry in terms of what is the cost of an ECG and what is the cost of the diagnosis of an ECG, and not really the cost of the hardware of the device. So fairly early on we didn't actually do any cost optimization. So the version 1 that I showed in the previous slide was maybe about twice as expensive as it should have been, and then version 2 actually brought that down, but it took us a year. But we were already in the market and we had the learnings from the market to be able to understand which features we needed to put in, which features we could get rid of, and hence make that trade-off a little more carefully. Yeah, no,
I think product managers play a very, very important role in hardware companies, and for all the entrepreneurs building hardware startups, it doesn't mean that they're not important in software companies, but I think the number of revisions that you need to do in hardware companies can cost them very dearly and eventually may kill these companies, because you have to look at your BOM, you have to look at the features that you want to support and the life of the product, once you kind of roll it out, and what can you manage in software, and if you have to do that, what flexibility do you want in hardware. So hence, customer requirements, where the market is going to head, competition, and your own journey. I think it has to be at a confluence of all of those. So I think one needs to keep this in mind, when making. You want to share something?
There's a tool that everyone should use. It's called a QFD. I was working for Siemens and I learned it, and we follow that discipline a lot, where the features that you want and the components that go in, you do a quantified modeling of that to what comes in to determine what you need. The parent may want something striking, and the feature, every decision can be quantified. It's not a subjective decision after a point. So just thought I should share it.
Sure. So wanted to I know both of you have chosen manufacturing partners, right? So who are working with you. What was the journey like? How did you make that decision? And how many of them did you talk to? And what were the critical, factors in terms of where you said, based on these, I would rather work with this partner?
Okay, so I think we've probably gone through, I would say maybe 4 manufacturing partners before we've settled on the one that we're using right now. So a lot of parameters, and I think there's this, I would say, what is specific to a hardware company in a manufacturing partner is discipline in the way that they handle their process, discipline in the way they handle their timelines, and in yield, right? So these are the things that really matter for a manufacturing partner, right? So process basically is, are they actually following what they say they are doing? And some of them will actually give you evidence of that. You should always visit their factory, look at how they manage their floor. We've talked to a lot of the people actually working on the floor, sat with them a few times, ye kaisa chalta, wo kaisa chalta. That sort of, just get a feel for this. The guy who is your point of contact, your product manager or production manager in the factory, very important for you to know him personally so that you can call him, dude, I've got this order, I need you to process this, I need 50 pieces like 3 days from now, right? Can you do it? He'll say, sir, aapke liye karunga, right? Of course, you can't do this every month, right? So you need to know that guy. The second thing is about timelines, right? People, especially, I have to say, very sorry to say that in India, people are not disciplined about timelines for delivery. They always overpromise. They cannot do it. Our partners in China, they are so good to work with. Probably also because they don't want to deal with the hassle of us going back to them so many times, right? They say we'll ship you on the 24th, they'll ship you on the 24th, right? They'll not ship you on the 23rd. And it will reach your office and it will get stuck in customs. We'll not talk about that.
Yes.
But it'll reach you, right? So I think that's the second bet. And I think in pricing is one of those things that probably comes much later. From when you're talking to a manufacturing partner, at first we were thinking about, we need to optimize the pricing for the manufacturing partner. It doesn't turn out to be that big of a deal because the margins are so low for all of these people. They play in the same margins.
Right.
And it's only at scale, when you're doing 10,000 pieces, 100,000 pieces, 1,000,000 pieces, that it actually makes a difference to you and your customer and your business as a consequence. So I think those are my views.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think the theoretical aspects of supply chain has been very well said by Zainul. Some insights that we learnt on how to pace it up quickly finding a manufacturer and finding your investor is the same process. You don't only the difference is that you don't go to the manufacturer that you want really to manufacture on day one. You go to that sector which your sector belongs to. If he coming from the healthcare goes to someone who makes complex products for kids,
Absolutely.
no matter how big a company, he's not going to be able to manufacture it. If I go with my Miko to Foxconn, they'll not be able to make it. They are experts at smartphones. Let them do that. Someone who's built a product for this category, that's your inner circle that you should contact. Approach each person, pitch, because they are significantly bigger guys than you guys. They are doing $100 million plus revenue, $500 million revenue. You're probably their smallest customer. So they have to be emotionally invested and see a long-term vision that this will grow big. Once they get that feeler, how proactive they are is all that important. Getting a fancy big manufacturer may not help you because he may not give you that justice of time that you deserve. So the person who respects you as a customer, even though you're the smallest customer and he's hungry for business, is the guy. I follow a simple rule: don't go after the machines, look after the people behind those machines, build relations, whether he's in Taiwan, China, Vietnam, India, doesn't matter. Experience from both our sides we shared. We see people hungry for business on the other side of the border. Thankfully, both of us have found someone, each of us, who we can entrust, and that person can entrust us. Everything else comes secondary. PNL, government relations, whatever it is comes secondary. You find a person you can trust who will deliver on time. That's all that matters. And that when you get that, your life is very simple. So,
Yeah, so I think domain expertise plays a very important role. I think having handled similar set of products or complementary products plays a very important role, and their mind share for something you do. And of course, as volumes go up is when you get their mind share, no matter what they say. But some of them do have good early stage engagement programs because they know that, you know, we all know whether it was Fitbit or Nest or GoPro or whoever, MakerBot, you know, they all grew in scale over a period of time. So they know that they're investing in these promising relationships, which eventually will become, you know, billion-dollar companies. So you have to go sell that vision to them, right, to kind of get their attention. But it's extremely important, right, not to compromise or make any, you know, harakiri, you know, kind of commit harakiri on that front, because that could pretty much, you know, hurt your company quite a bit. Now, you know, moving on to operations and maintenance, again, you know, you have two different products. You know, one obviously targeting the healthcare centers and the other, you know, the consumer. So how do you handle the operations and maintenance aspects today? And have you built out the support? And I know probably you're at a very early stage and your R&D people are the ones who are even supporting them. But I'd love to hear your thoughts in terms of how are you handling the O&M part?
Right. So actually we've scaled pretty much all over the country. We are currently in 23 states. We have about 1,500 centers that are using our products. We've done over 1 million ECGs, you know, over the last few years. So it turns out our customers are very finicky. They are all doctors, and they all expect a service guy to show up every month and clean the ECG machine. ECG machine clean kiya kya,
Yeah.
right? And to pick up the check, right? And so there's so we've built out actually a service team which is across the country. We have both direct service and we have through channel partners and distributors across the country. Today, I think we have about 35 people.
Sure.
Right? You know, you know, mostly metros and things like that. And I'd say that even if there's no, even if there's no incident at these centers, our service guys just go show their face. It's a relationship, and they'll, you know, swap something out or do something or do a maintenance. And we have also built a full customer support channel team that does take care of
Sure.
you know, issues and tickets.
Question.
Absolutely. I think a hardware company, whatever percentage you have, you know, however great your engineering team is, you will get customer feedback, and you will have to deal with this, do swap outs, do returns, do repairs, all kinds of things.
Right, right. Sneh, how about...
so since B2C play, selling across brick and mortar stores and e-commerce platforms is our primary way of
Right.
sales
Distribution.
and distribution. And we started with multiple aspects slightly ahead of time. So from a customer support perspective, we know the root cause of a prospective problem of a unit before you approach us. So the intent being, once we scale up, my dream is that once you come to a customer support center of ours, wherever it would be, the person is already ready with the replacement part. He knows, because we do cloud tracking of health of components on the robot.
Right.
On a real-time level. Every unit that goes to a customer, when he calls the customer support, we know from where he's purchased, when he's purchased, because the supply chain on the market side is tracked for every unit. So often in India, people tell us कि अरे मेरे को ऐसा मिला, मेरे को ये था, वो था. We know for very well. So the customer support team can give insights that okay, we see that you've used
And
the
customers
product.
are okay with that, giving, you know, that, I mean,
So there is something.
ensuring that connectivity happens from their homes and back to your cloud.
So there's an approval that is taken, and
Sure.
this is primarily for customer support purposes.
Right.
That is there, and helping and benefiting them. Also, we are very, very strict on all the aspects of the payment terms of distributors. Now we are adding a new process that if a distributor defaults on payments, maybe all the customers will get that, okay, these devices, we put a fear on the distributors that, like he said, 90 days payments can become 150 days and all of that. We put a fear that we can disable the units if the payment doesn't come on time. So that there is such, of course, that's a very extreme step, but people fear up and they pay and things happen. So these are small optimizations that are every day added because your end product is cloud connected. And at the same time, you have a connect with the customer who's using it. Since it's a new category, once it ships out, there's a welcome call that goes to the customer. Post-purchase, there's a customer support who explains the product. We schedule in-home demos in Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore. There'll be a person who will come, sit for 2 hours with your child, explain the whole product. You spend 20 grand on it. So therefore, we give you the top-notch customer support that you need. I myself go at homes and on weekends and I spend time with the customers. That's the best place you get to learn from them.
Sure. So I think at least we have covered most of the topics. We'll open it up for Q&A. But for all the entrepreneurs out there who are looking to build and scale, obviously hardware operations of hardware companies, I think each of these things, whether it is a design and making sure that the DFT, DFA, or design for manufacturing aspects are taken care of, you choose the right manufacturing partner. Certifications where relevant, you do the COGS analysis. I think another very important aspect is local sourcing versus global sourcing. What portion of your BOM is from kind of global sourcing, and again, like we didn't talk much about the excise duties or customs duties, and then eventually building out a solid operations and maintenance team. I think they all become very, very important. We open it up for Q&A now. Any questions? Yeah.
So it's been a great journey, I think, because we have seen from top to bottom. So when it comes to before requirement stage, I believe a lot of brainstorming will be happening between the team, what kind of features to put and what not to put. And so if we narrow down two things will come, which is logical and wise decisions. So when brainstorm is happening between a lot of teams, between like hardware, software, these can be implemented and this cannot be implemented. And so two things can happen. One is logically we define features and we choose wisely. What is a comment on that?
You want to take that? Yeah, go ahead.
Feature selection for a consumer product is a very irrational thought process.
Okay.
So one thing is how you entice the customer to buy. That could be some feature, but what he uses it for could be completely different.
Okay.
And that could be a completely irrational point of purchase. Like for example, you could, that can be a separate, but don't logically choose your features. Have a UX thought process to defining the consumer journey with your product and see where do you see the maximum usage engagement coming from, and then define what's your key criteria that you want. What are you trying to do in the consumer's life? What period of his life are you going to take in for doing what? Based on that, you decide your features from there. And of course, if there is prior data to it, like we have a good data from early Miko users where customers have requested, we want this feature a lot.
Exactly.
And no one can logically come out with that.
Exactly.
Once that comes in, then we put a higher preference to that because the market needs that feature, so you do it.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
So I just wanted to add something. In our case, my CEO and co-founder is a cardiologist himself, right? And he's seen maybe thousands of these ECGs being taken by him or in front of him. And the one sort of spec that he gave me when we built our first is that it should not in the very least add any pain to the technician taking the ECG.
Yeah, that's it.
Right? So when we built this product, it we call this zero workflow change. There's no change in workflow for the ECG technician. So whatever it does, it needs to do it magically. It needs to do it transparently. You take the ECG as you normally would. Everything else happens, by itself. Suddenly, an ECG will pop up in your app saying, "Hey, you've got a new ECG. Here's the diagnosis." Right? And that was the vision that we started this product with. We were able to, actually pull that off fairly early on.
I think so. My point about product managers, they play a very, very critical role. Outside of what you have to offer as a company or a product, you need to very clearly know the customer requirements and the competitors' offerings. Only at the confluence of those three you can make those decisions. It's very important. Yeah.
Thank you, Zainul.
Thanks.
What is the warranty of a product?
So you do mean time to failure estimation by doing accelerated lifetime testing of every component inside the product separately, because probably as a product as a whole, the element. So generally, most components come with their estimated mean time to failure.
Yeah.
You have to do it for the most least time to failure. Like suppose if there's a component that can fail very fast, do it and ensure that it is there and validate what is there in datasheet. If it is not there, get it and derive that accelerated testing. There are different ways. Temperature ranges to usage conditions. You can subject your elements to that and get that result out.
So
There's a standard ways to do it.
Quick shortcut, if you have a battery, start with a battery.
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
That's the first thing that fails.
So what is the standard?
What is the
year.
standard of?
Depends on the chemistry of the battery.
Yeah.
No,
It
not
would-
the battery. What is the standard for
Warranty.
1 year warranty? Or
See, the machines that we use usually from, so the ECG machines that we use, the vendors, they give you a 1 year warranty, and their mean part replacement cycle is up to 7 years. So they'll give you parts for up to 7 years. So that sort of gives you a feel for that. And that's sort of something that we also hook on to and make sure that, we make sure that our device will also work for up to 7 years.
It's very sector to sector.
It's very-
I think we're
dependent.
done.
Oil and gas industry, 40 years is what.
Yeah, it depends.
Yeah,
okay,
it depends
thanks.
a lot.
Thank you.
One last question. Yeah, please.
We come up with a product. Of course, the parts are all known, and also the certifications that are going to go along with it would also be calculated as a part of the product cost. But how do you amortize the software development cost? Is it like you would phase it out for 100 volumes, say, let us say you sell 100 of these components, then you would be recovering your software cost, or how is it? Is there any
across the
ballpark
shelf
figure?
life of the product in the market, right? Because if your product is there,
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
certain
So I think it's an equation.
Okay.
We will
Okay.
take it offline. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you.
Thank
All right, thank you,
you.
gentlemen.
Thank you.
Sateesh, I'm going to request you to present a token of our appreciation to Zainul and to Sneh, please. And there's one for you. All right. Thank you, gentlemen.